How you doing? This is Dr. Jimbo Love's show. I'm here at Brothers Bar and Grill at Northfield, Shops at Northfield with Seth Matthew.
How's it going, people?
We are back, and let's talk a little bit about last week. We've got some different games that we were talking about, and that is Michigan State versus Ohio State. And as anyway, a lot of you that saw it there, Michigan State just got absolutely rolled. Ohio State is the real deal. They were up 49-0 at halftime.
Yeah, people got to realize this Ohio State team, now that's number 2 in the ranking, but they had a loss early to Oregon, very early with the freshman quarterback. C.J. Stroud is playing out of his mind right now. This Ohio State team looks to steamroll their way into the college football playoff, and I don't see many people stopping them. They are scoring at will on any team. They have a very interesting game today, which we'll get into here in a little bit, but Ohio State is looking like the real deal.
Absolutely. And then we had OU versus Iowa State. Now, Seth had said that Iowa State happened to be the thorn in their side throughout the last couple of years. Not the case last week. OU won pretty convincingly, even though the score was pretty close.
Yeah, you're looking at an Iowa State team. They did get ranked for a little bit when they upset Oklahoma State, but has very underperformed this year, especially for an Iowa State standard. And when it came to Oklahoma, it was a score-for-score game. I think at one point OU did get up by 2 scores, and it ended up being separated by less than 1 score. So Oklahoma got through it, but again, they're not the explosive Oklahoma they used to be.
No. Arkansas versus Alabama, we saw a very, very good Arkansas team really make a run at Alabama, but again, Alabama's so good.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that did hurt them was that they did drop from 2 to 3 because of the game. Of course, Ohio State blowing out Michigan State helped them move up in the ranking.
Which I'm kind of glad to see. I mean, you look at OU, has done pretty much nothing wrong this year, and you're going to drop them out of the top 10 for a little bit. They just squeaked in here in a little bit. But at the end of the day, Alabama, they got things done. It was a close game. I expected it to be kind of close. I was 50-50 kind of because Georgia did blow out this Arkansas team pretty convincingly.
Yeah.
But Alabama made it through, and it looks like they're going to be set to face Georgia here for their conference.
The SEC championship game, big time next week. We've got Oklahoma State, who stayed. They stayed with a 1 loss against Texas Tech. They just were too much for Texas Tech. Their defense was tough, and Texas Tech was looking to rebuild for next year.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Texas Tech getting beat like that. Didn't really mean much to them. They've been losing all this year. But OK State did something right there where they punched their ticket. They're waiting, even though they got a big game today against Oklahoma. They get to go to the conference championship no matter what happens today.
Absolutely. So you have Bedlam this week, and then if Oklahoma wins, then next week we'll have another rematch of Bedlam in the Big 12 Conference Championship.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm very proud of my South Carolina Gamecocks. They won another big game. They beat Florida this year, which is a huge thing for us.
Yeah, did you see that coming?
I didn't see it coming, not in our coach's first year. South Carolina jumped out. They were down 14-0, fought back, and ended up playing a great game, made them bowl eligible, and handed Auburn, Bo Nixon, less Auburn, a loss.
Yeah.
What are your feelings on Auburn? Did you get a chance to see any of that game at all? I mean, without Bo Nixon, the team looked really anemic.
They're an up-and-down team to begin with. They've won some decent games this year, but they've also lost some games they shouldn't. So, I mean, Auburn's been very inconsistent with how they show up to games. And, I mean, this is just one where the other team showed up better than them. And I feel like if you're going to be making the top 4, you got to be consistent. And Auburn's just not there. They get spurts of greatness, and then they just fall off right away.
Absolutely. And then, of course, our big upset special was the Oregon versus Utah. We said, Oregon was going to have their hands full going into Utah, and that is exactly what happened. They were blown out. The first half, it was 28-0. Vegas was clued in a little bit. Someone clued them in because they had them as a +3, and then I guess it moved towards game time at almost a touchdown.
Yeah.
For it. So.
Well, and you look at this right now. I mean, I will be honest. I have not watched Utah play one time this year, but somebody in Vegas must have been watching them because they saw this coming. Utah looked tough. They kind of flew under the radar this year. I don't even know if we've ever even talked about them on the show. But from what I saw of this game, that Utah defense is deadly. And they have the offense to back it up. Oregon, supposedly this high-scoring team, could not keep up and could never get it quite going against this Utah team.
No, they looked just like in slow motion when I watched the game, just completely outclassed. Well, yeah, as we were saying earlier, the big game that's going to be being played right now is Ohio State versus Michigan. Michigan jumped out to a quick lead, 7-zip, and then just as we were coming on the air, it looked like Ohio State, did they score? Was it 7-7?
I believe they did. I haven't seen the score, but with how close they were, I'm assuming they punched it in.
Yeah, they intercepted it, and then C.J. Stroud was working against Michigan's defense. Remember, we got the receiver core for Ohio State, which is top in the nation. The red zone offense will really determine this game, as what was said on College Game Day this morning. Michigan must keep Ohio State under 40, because if it becomes a track meet, Michigan is not set up to be that kind of ball team. What do you got on that?
Yeah, so the big thing is C.J. Stroud obviously got benched in the first half against Michigan State, not because he played bad, but because he destroyed them. You're running into a team that is running on all cylinders, has only gotten better every single week. In Michigan, minus the fault against Michigan State, I mean, they've done well. I just don't think it's Ohio State well. I think it's going to end up being that Ohio State, even though this is a lot of potential for Michigan to do the upset, I think Ohio State's fine, because right now, if Ohio State wins, this will set the record for 9 straight wins in this series.
Wow.
Jim Harbaugh, I don't believe, has ever beat Ohio State. Now,
as a player, he did.
Yeah, as a player.
Back in 1986.
And I got some questions from some fans of, like, do you think Jim Harbaugh is gone? I was like, can you really get rid of a guy that's only taking you 1 to 2 losses a game? And they're like, yeah, but he never beats Ohio State.
Yeah. You know, a 10-win season, though, does speak pretty wildly. Even if he doesn't win another game, that's still a great accomplishment, and he's got the program going in the right direction, even though I am not a Harbaugh fan at all. I've got Ohio State in this game, and it sounds like you do.
Yeah, I do, too.
Excellent. The big game that Seth's a little nervous about is tonight, OU versus Oklahoma State, the Bedlam game. Tell us a little bit about what you got for that.
So Oklahoma is beatable in this game, but the only way that happens is if Oklahoma State's defense can actually hold Caleb Williams. And right now, a lot of teams have, but Oklahoma squeaked it out, because Oklahoma's D, I mean, I don't think Oklahoma State has a great offense at all. But I also don't think Oklahoma has a great defense. So if Oklahoma's defense can get some stops, and Caleb can come out and does what he does best, I think OU is looking to play a rematch here in this conference championship.
You know, one thing that a statistic that you may not be aware of is OU does rank 10th in offense.
Really?
And believe it or not. And maybe it's just because of the amount of points that they've been able to score. But that is a positive thing for your OU.
Yeah,
boys.
and I think 10th in offense is great now, but I mean, when you look back, OU fans have been spoiled. Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield. These guys are putting up 40 points a game and just crushing opponents. And, I mean, the defense on OU has improved, but it seems like the offense isn't that explosive offense that it has been in past years with those amazing all-NFL quarterbacks.
Oh, incredible. The transfer portal has been more kind to Oklahoma than anybody else, I think, in the country.
Yeah, I'd agree.
We have the Iron Bowl, of course, Alabama versus Auburn. Again, this is going to be really a blowout. I think Alabama handles them. But in these rivalry games, records really never really matter. So they really hate each other. They're interstate rivals. Alabama is a 20-point favorite, so I'm going to feel like that'll be too much for Auburn to handle. Any word on Bo Nix? Is he playing today?
I haven't really looked into Bo Nix because I was really looking at the other Heisman candidate on the other side, Alabama, Bryce Young. Like, I just can't believe this guy. 38 touchdowns thrown this year. He's thrown for over 3,500 yards, and he's only had 3 interceptions. When you throw that much, you would think there'd be some bad plays or some picks. But no, this kid's the real deal as a sophomore. I don't know who to pick right now, C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, because both are going to be amazing. But C.J. Stroud's a freshman. Bryce Young, I have to give it to Bryce Young if he beats Georgia.
Yeah, it's safe to say that we have some very, very huge quarterbacks that we can be watching over the next couple of years. The best thing about college is that these quarterbacks need to stay for at least 3 years. Mm-hmm. It's not like the college basketball where you see the guy come in, he has an outstanding season, and then we lose him somewhere in the NFL or the NBA. So, Carolina versus Clemson, again, this is kind of a a South Carolina game as far as interstate rival. It would take a miracle for South Carolina to win. Clemson is surging after a big win over Wake Forest last week. We'll have to wait and see. This series, South Carolina has not won since 2013. Before that, they won 5 straight, so go figure. But Clemson, again, has Carolina's number, and I'd have to say, as much as it pains me, I'm going to say that Clemson wins by at least a touchdown.
Yeah, and I just have a question. Like, why is everyone hating on Clemson? I get that you've only lost maybe 1 game a year for the last 3 years with Trevor Lawrence. You only lost 3 games this year, 8-3, and in the last 4 games, the team minimally puts up 30 points. So the key to victory for South Carolina is you got to stop them. If you can hold them down, I don't know if they can. I mean, right now, South Carolina, they're not putting up the most points, but that defense is holding other opponents down to in the 20s or lower. And so if South Carolina can actually hold them, they got a real shot. But if it turns into a shootout, I just think Clemson's too much.
I do too. And South Carolina was, ranked below 100, okay, as far as total offenses in Division I. And that was just a couple weeks back. So you're absolutely right on that side. Penn State versus Michigan State. It should be interesting. We've got 2 teams that are kind of coming in on losing, a little bit of a losing streak. Penn State has lost 4 of their last 6, and Michigan State has lost 2 out of their last 3. What have you got for this one?
So I'm giving this to Penn State, even though it's at Michigan State. And the big reason why is we can look at records here and say, oh, well, Michigan State only just got crushed by Ohio State. But it's more than that. Penn State, in those losses, didn't have their starting quarterback. People forget that Iowa game that Penn State had in hand, it should be over, that their starting quarterback went down to Iowa, came back and won. And then he was out for a couple games after. So these losses really aren't on him. I believe he's only started in and completed the game in 1 of the losses.
Okay.
So it sounds like he's playing today. And Michigan State showed that they have a terrible secondary.
Oh, it's horrible.
When you get a guy that basically is just playing right now, I don't know, it would be for NFL stock or anything like that, I think Penn State's going to pick apart Michigan State today.
Yeah, that's who I've got too. Good old Penn State. And you're right, they're on the road, so it's they're playing in Lansing, so it should be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Our last featured game for the college is going to be Wisconsin versus Minnesota. Minnesota
for the Axe,
and it is for the Axe. Absolutely. This is going to be all about defensive matchups. You've got 2 of the top 4 Ds in the country competing against others, so look for this to be a little bit of a low-scoring game. Last season's game was an overtime thriller. Wisconsin pulled it out 20-17.
Yeah, and I think Wisconsin has this game in hand. Yeah, they're surging. If we look at their losses, all of them came at the beginning of the year. All the really good opponents, Notre Dame, Michigan, and they lost to Penn State when Penn State was full force. I mean, those are your 3 losses. You're still a great football team. Minnesota right now is overperforming, and I appreciate it, but I think this is where it comes to the end. This is only going to go for where you're going to get for a bowl game, because after Iowa's win last night, that kind of shut down Wisconsin and Minnesota's hopes of going to the Big Ten championship. But Minnesota's doing it with almost nothing. They had their starting running back that got injured against Ohio State week 1, and he was out for the year. Good news, he announced to come back, and he is a dominant force and a big part of that offense. And then they put in Pitts, which was a backup running back. A couple weeks later, he goes down. So they're on a 3rd-string running back on a mainly running team. So Minnesota has really overperformed, beating the likes of Nebraska and all that without those types of players. But Wisconsin, they're just surging. I honestly hope it's not a blowout, even though it's in Minnesota. But I wouldn't be surprised if Wisconsin really dominates this game and just runs over Minnesota today.
Yeah, Wisconsin is a tough 8-3 team.
Mm-hmm.
You compare them. You look at the other. We were talking about Clemson being an 8-3 team. 8-3 is a good record.
Yeah.
And so it should be interesting. I'm pulling really hard for your Minnesota Golden Gophers, but I think Wisconsin's going to end up pulling this one out by at least a touchdown.
Yeah.
I'm thinking. The next portion, we're going to go into our NFL portion. We're just going to go right into it. Last week we had 6 featured games. We'll start with the Vikings versus the Packers.
Go.
And Seth is excited because it was a huge game for the Vikings, picking up the win against the Packers. What were your impressions of that game?
So it looks like Mike Zimmer's wising up a little bit, because compare him to last year and the year before, he would run the ball 40 times a game and maybe throw 10, but this is now turning into a more balanced team, and it's harder to defend. Vikings aren't being as predictable as they have in past, and they're just looking like a good football team. If you look at all their losses this year, they're in every game. The only issue they have is they're not closing people out. And, I mean, I don't have to say anything about the Packers. They've been closing people out.
Oh, no
and
kidding.
that's why they're number one in the division. But I'm glad to see Minnesota got this one off. That actually moved them into a wild card spot, which is huge for them.
Yeah, very good. Very good. I'm happy for the Vikings. Colts versus the Bills. Again, the Bills, we just don't know which team is going to show up half the time.
Mm-hmm.
Colts ended up winning, pulling out a victory over the Bills. What were your thoughts about Josh Allen and the Bills?
So they did struggle last week. I mean, they already played this week on Thanksgiving, and they handled business, and they honestly destroyed the Saints. But, I mean, you ran into a surging team that you weren't ready for. The Colts, I would say, is one of the hottest teams in football right now. They got another tough matchup this week. But Jonathan Taylor, going up against the number one Bills defense, and you're putting up 5 touchdowns, it was amazing. I had friends in fantasy be like, did you see Jonathan Taylor got 50 points for me in fantasy? He's the real deal, and he graduated from Wisconsin. He's a hard-nosed runner, and he can catch the ball. He's honestly might be the future best running back in this league.
Very good, very good. We had the Cardinals versus the Seahawks. Again, it was the bird game, and the Cardinals were able to pull it out over the Seahawks. What was your impression? Did you watch Russell Wilson at all? Did his thumb look, or his finger look like it was bothering him?
So I think Russell Wilson's struggling to find an identity with this team again because, I mean, they don't have any running game to speak of. Alex Collins was meant to be a backup pretty much his whole career. I've never seen him take the full load, and with Chris Carson's out for the year, nobody's really dealing with the running threat with Seattle. So you're really relying on Russell to carry your team. And the Cardinals, that's not, think of the QB depth. You didn't face Kyler Murray. You faced Colt McCoy from Texas,
right,
who is 2-1 with those Cardinals. And I think that speaks volumes to how much support Kyler Murray has in the Cardinals, that you can put in a backup QB and still win games. And Seattle's just not built like that. So the Cardinals handed him another loss.
Yep, exactly. The Cowboys versus the Chiefs. Looks like the Chiefs got their act back together, and they're starting to click. Patrick Mahomes had a pretty good ball game and beat the Cowboys pretty handily.
Yeah. Chiefs look back to normal. They don't even have Clyde Edwards back yet, but when he comes back, he'll fit right in. Cowboys starting to look a little shaky. They played on Thanksgiving as well, and they took another loss. I mean, historically, the Raiders in the last couple of years have started out red hot every year, looked like a dominant team, might make a run, and they fall off. I believe it was like last year where they started out something like 6-1 or something like that, and they finished a 500 season. And right now they're on track to do that again. So,
very good. Washington versus Carolina. Again, we saw Cam Newton got the start. Didn't work out the way the Carolina faithful had hoped, and Washington picked up the victory.
Yeah, and I mean, Washington's that weird team. Nobody really stands out on that team as like a dominant player, but they play well together. This is a second straight big win. They just beat Tampa the previous week.
Exactly.
And so Washington's looking tough. Sorry about my tangent about the Raiders. We were talking about the Cowboys, but they lost 2 games either. Not a big Cowboys fan. They're going to finish 8-8 too. But, yeah, Washington is just an overall solid team without like a superstar. When you talk about any other team in the league, you can name wide receivers, running backs, things like that. I only know really Heineke and I don't really know him. I just watched him play one game at the beginning of the year, and he won. And this team's starting to get things together.
Right. Yes, it is. And then it brings us to our last featured game of last week, the Steelers versus the Chargers. Steelers had a pretty big misfortune before the game. Of course, T.J. Watt was out, and 2 of their other all-pro secondary individuals were out. So they were really losing 25 to basically 1/3 of their defense. They could not stop the Chargers, and the Chargers were just too much for the Steelers.
Yeah, and I mean, the Steelers are a difficult team to figure out right now. All their wins are looking pretty ugly. They have the tie against Detroit. Their losses are somehow still close, too, because as soon as I saw the Chargers, how much points they put up, I thought the Steelers were done. But you know what? They always find a way to hang around. Ben gets his short passes. Najee Harris is really coming into his own. So, I mean, this was a great game, probably the best game of the week because it was back and forth and it came right down to the end.
Yeah, sure did. They got me all excited. They tied it up, and they ended up going up by 3 points, and unfortunately our defense just could not stop Herbert. And when you're losing, three quality individuals like that, it's really tough.
Yeah.
And two of them were COVID people, so we didn't know till late in the week that they were going to be gone. So this week we're talking about Sunday. We're going to start right off with Seth's Vikings. The Vikings 5-5 versus the 5-5 49ers. 49ers are looking for some ball security and must stop. The Cook, Jefferson, Thielen trifecta.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Vikings look tough right now. Defense is still a little shaky. They need to start tightening things up on there, get some turnovers, because honestly, it's not the offense's fault. Kirk Cousins is having statistically the best year of his career. He has 21 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. He's throwing the ball a lot more this year, which is freeing up Dalvin Cook to get some big runs. And this whole team looks like it's coming together. On the flip side, you have the 49ers. Jimmy Garoppolo is literally playing to have another year with them, because if he doesn't succeed, they already drafted his replacement. We've seen him a couple times this year, Trey Lance, and we'll just have to see how that plays out. But they also don't have a running back right now. Eric Mitchell is their guy. Wasn't the plan guy, I don't believe. Deebo Samuel, I don't know if he's a wide receiver or running back, but he is so fast.
These are deep threats.
Well, yeah, but why I bring up his running back ability is when he got his touchdown this last week, it was all through a handoff, and he has multiple handoffs that have gone to him, and he is so fast that he's still scoring. Now I'm giving the edge to my Vikings for one reason. I think this is going to be a great game. I think it's going to be back and forth. And the 49ers are at home, and that's why I'm choosing the Vikings. The 49ers have only won one game at home all season.
Interesting, and that is so opposite, because even Vegas gives 3 to 3.5 points to a home team whenever they're playing, in this league.
I'm waiting for the 49ers to call and be like, can we play every game away? Because they are dominant away.
Exactly. The next game is the Titans at 8-3 versus the Pats, which are surging. The Pats are excited because they get a shot at the number 1 team, a team considered number 1 in the AFC being the Titans. The Pats have a 5-game winning streak. The Titans, on the other hand, are coming off of a tough loss to the Texans, inexplicably.
Yeah, and I mean, you're looking at this. Mac Jones is really coming into his own. He's starting to have Bill Belichick, Tom Brady-esque feel that the Patriots might be back. With this winning streak and with Buffalo faltering, Patriots have a very winnable division again.
Absolutely.
They had won it over 10 years straight, and Buffalo took the first one last year, and it looks like it might have only been a one-year vacation for the Patriots because they're on their way back. Talking with the Titans, they have lost Derrick Henry. They just released Adrian Peterson. Sounds like they're going to commit to McNichols. They have decent wide receivers.
Pollard, too. They brought Pollard in, I believe, from their practice squad.
Yep, and but, I mean, I don't really know what to expect with this, because now you're really relying on Tannehill, who hasn't in the last couple of years had to carry the team like he has to now. We see it with the Cardinals where they had the depth to carry on with wins. I just don't know if the Titans can. And with the Patriots playing red hot with the new duo of Damian Harris and Rashad Stevenson, Oklahoma boy, who you haven't heard much about for one reason. Bill Belichick is very unforgiving. I respect you as a coach. But he fumbled on his very first game. We never saw him till like 9 weeks later. So he is now looking. Damian Harris has been the guy. He had a concussion. They went back with Stevenson. But Stevenson really carried the ball well, and it's starting to look like he might take that starting job away from Damian Harris. Either way, great 1-2 punch, and you have a great team in the Patriots that I think are going to take the Titans this week.
Interesting. I've got the Pats on that in that game as well. The Bucs versus the Colts. You got the 7-3 Bucs versus the 6-5 Colts. Tampa is 2-3 on the road. They have lost the last 2 games. Colts have won 5 out of the last 6, and they're surging. So Tampa is a 3-point favorite today. What are your thoughts on Tampa? Do you think Tampa can get things going?
So I think Tampa can do it. I mean, the only player they're missing is Antonio Brown, which I wouldn't say is insignificant, but when you have Gronk and you have Mike Evans and you have Godwin, it doesn't hurt you too bad. You also have Leonard Fournette at running back. So you have a very good team there. The big question for this game is, what type of Tampa defense is going to show up? Because you just saw what Jonathan Taylor did to Buffalo last week, and he is having a year. He now is officially the number 1 running back in the NFL.
Wow.
It took him 2 to 3 weeks to catch Derrick Henry, but he's there. And so what we're really looking at, Colts D has played pretty tough all season long. And you're looking at, basically, I think the Colts win this one because Jonathan Taylor is going to be too much. I don't think Tampa's going to be able to stop it. I think that Tampa's going to be able to hang in there because, it's Tom Brady. It's the GOAT. We're not going against him too hard.
No.
But I give the edge to the Colts in a very close one, and I think it's going to be a high-scoring game.
Interesting. Very interesting. Chargers versus the Broncos. The Broncos are still, believe it or not, at 5-5, are still in the hunt for the AFC West. The Chargers are coming off a very good win against the Steelers. It should be interesting to see what will happen. Will the Chargers top 10 pass D, and will Herbert be accurate today? Those are our big questions. I know that as I was driving over here, they said that Chubb for the Broncos is a 50-50 in a game-time decision, so that'll be interesting to see whether or not the Broncos will have him, because remember, they lost Von Miller to trade a couple weeks back.
Well, and I think the Broncos are setting themselves up. I believe that the Broncos are going to get crushed this game. I think the Chargers have already taken their licks. They've rebuilt a great team, and now it's going to start to show. The Broncos, on the other hand, they signed some big receivers, but their quarterback situation is a mess. Teddy B is the guy. He's not playing terrible, but he's also not winning games. And so what we're really looking at here is what are the Broncos going to do? Are they giving up on this season yet? And if it were me, maybe I would. I would probably start tanking, get that better pick, and I would try to entice a good quarterback through a trade or free agency, get someone over here like the likes of Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. But right now they don't have a team to make a run. I think the Chargers do. You saw that Steelers game. They have a very tough defense and offense, even though they gave up a lot of points to that Steelers team. But I think the Chargers are going to walk away with this one.
Yeah, I do too. I think I got the Chargers by winning by 7 or more. The Steelers versus the Bengals. We got a good AFC North rivalry. The difference here is you're going to have Deontay Johnson, who did not play in the first matchup, nor did T.J. Watt play in the first matchup. And so that's going to be an advantage for the Steelers. But the Bengals handled the Steelers in Pittsburgh and beat them pretty soundly. They did not look like your typical bungles of the past. Another thing you want to remember that is that the Bengals offense is really evolving. They have that long throw, of course, to Jamar Chase. You've got to stop him. The Steelers must stop that. But they've also been playing a lot of these short passes lately. So watch for Burrow and some short dump-offs, and hopefully my Steelers can hang in there in Cincinnati in a bitter rivalry game.
Yeah, and I think the Bengals have been very fortunate this year. Kind of opposite of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's had to deal with a lot of injuries this year. Bengals have kind of come out unscathed. They have a couple injuries, but nothing too significant. This is the first year Joe Mixon, I believe he's Oklahoma as well, first year I've ever seen him actually play a full season. Usually he gets banged up or something, and he is really turning out to be a top 10 running back this year. He's just a tough runner. He's fast. But on the other side, you got Najee Harris. Now, he did get a little banged up in that last game for the Steelers, so hopefully he's healthy and there's no nagging injuries. So there'll be a good running back matchup. Yeah, the big question is, Jamar Chase, X factor. If Pittsburgh can shut him down, they're in this game, they win it. But if you can't shut him down, it looks like the Bengals are going to walk away with it.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to have to get the pressure on Joe Burrow and definitely not let him sit back in the pocket. One thing about Burrow is he's a young quarterback, and if you can get him moving a little bit out of the pocket and change his angles, he's not as an effective a quarterback as you might see, as Patrick Holmes or someone like that. So we're going to stay in the AFC North. We've got the Browns versus the Ravens. The Browns are 6-5. The Ravens 7-3. The real story of this is you've got the Browns. They're favored 3.5, but you've got the Ravens with 10 players that are questionable that we don't know whether or not they're going to be playing. That has been a factor for them all year long. How's Mayfield's health? Again, Seth's got a theory on Mayfield. Yeah, maybe you want to share that a little bit.
Yeah, so I just question the Browns' decision-making here. Right now, you have multiple injuries to your franchise quarterback. I believe he's due a contract here soon. But at some point, you have to shut him down. Let him get healthy if you think you can make playoffs. You have the miracle throw guy, Case Keenum, that came over from the Broncos. I know he didn't do well here, but he did well in Minnesota. that might be able to hold the ship down, kind of like Colt McCoy did for Kyler Murray, get a couple wins, and hopefully make a playoff run. Because if you keep him in there too long, at what point did you just sacrifice your next season? Because he's not going to be able to get healthy. I think it's time to shut Baker down for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Let him get some rest. There's no point to keep throwing him in there when it's a foot, leg, shoulder. There's just too many injuries, and you have a very good team. But going on the Ravens side, even with 10 questionable players, you know who's not questionable? Lamar Jackson. And that's honestly all you need. He is super fast. My favorite quote from Lamar Jackson was everybody criticized him last year and said, yeah, everyone said you can't throw. And they said, do you think you proved your haters wrong? He said, probably not, but I'm a hell of a running back. And he is the X factor. So I'm going to give this to the Ravens, but I think, you know, the Browns have everything they need to win. You have Jarvis Landry. You have a Nick Chubb. Even if Kareem Hunt's not in there, Dearness Johnson has proven as a third string. When Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb ran out, what did he do to the Broncos? He ran over 100 yards and got multiple touchdowns. Exactly. So they have a lot of depth. They're just not using it right now, and their team's just getting more and more banged up every week. But back to the Ravens, they are something else in the NFL. If you haven't got to watch them this year, tune in. It's probably the most exciting football you'll see. Just because Lamar Jackson, you just never know what he's going to do.
He's amazing. He reminds me of Michael Vick, his first couple years in the league, where he was just so much faster than everybody else. You almost just started to cringe when the secondary or anybody blitzed him, because that got him outside the pocket, and then he was more effective. And I think we see that a lot with Lamar Jackson. It's tough in Cleveland. You know, Cleveland has, you know, they're an up-and-coming franchise, and a lot of people have been waiting a long time. Yeah. So, you know, they see a record of 6-5, and of course they're thinking, hey, we're still in it. We really can make a run for the playoffs. And that's what I think you may see with Baker Mayfield. He feels that, and he's pushing to get back maybe a little bit too prematurely. Hopefully it won't lead to any kind of permanent injury.
Well, and the weird thing I heard, too, going into this next draft, there's rumors that the Browns are going to take a quarterback.
Interesting.
Which is weird. It never seems to turn out well. You saw how mad Aaron Rodgers got when Jordan Love showed up.
Exactly.
I think Kirk Cousins expected us to take a quarterback for the Vikings, so he's fine with it. But Baker's young. I think it's a very interesting decision to go get a quarterback when you have, if Baker's healthy, you have at least 8 to 10 years with him still to already go get a backup.
Absolutely. And you know, because of the commercials you watch, he lives in the stadium, so we really wouldn't want to have to displace his home and have him traded to someplace else. Who's to say that he'll even be able to find a home in that new stadium? Mm-hmm. All right, so we are here at Brothers Bar and Grill. We are at the shops at Northfield, and Seth is the general manager here. Lots of good things going on. We'd be a little remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the Rapids and their disappointments over the weekend. They lost a real tough game. And there was a goal with, about a minute left?
Yep.
That ended up, it was a 1-0 game. And it just, the Rapids couldn't get anything going. What are your feelings on that real quick?
So, I mean, the Rapids, I'll give it to them. They overperformed all year. It was nice seeing them up there. It was nice seeing them at the number 1 seed. But at the end of the day, we were in a rebuild. We've been in a rebuild for the last couple of years, ever since we made our last championship run a couple of years ago. I believe it was 2016. That we had a great run. I believe we won it. But since then, we've always been in the bottom of the bracket, barely making playoffs, if any. So this is a young team with a newer coach, and I think they just showed this year what they can do. Few adjustments. Don't be surprised to see the Rapids back and make a run for that championship next year.
Absolutely. And it was a game that's close to our heart because the stadium is only maybe 2-3 miles away from where we're sitting right now.
Yeah, they sold it out to 18,000 fans.
And it was a great. I watched certain segments of it, you know. I always tease everybody, you know, I tease them about soccer and say that, you know, if I want to watch a bunch of guys run around for 90 minutes and not score, I can always take my buddies to happy hour.
Yeah.
That's kind of a joke for soccer, which is, of course, not a very good joke.
Yeah, we made a joke at Thanksgiving, all right, take a drink every time someone scores the goal.
And you had to wait till the very end.
Everyone's sober after that soccer game.
Well, great. Well, we're here, Brothers. We'll be here for the rest of the afternoon. Feel free to come down here. A lot of comfort food on the menu. Seth will hook you up. We've got many, many games going on. This is rivalry week again. So if you want to see a game, just ask Seth, ask one of the bartenders. They'll put it on the TV that's nearest to you. And tell us a little bit about what have we got going on at all here at Brothers this week.
So right now this week we got the rest of college football. We got the big games on Sunday, and then going into next week, I mean, a lot of people are booking holiday parties. We have a lot of space open if you want to book with us. We have a great upstairs mezzanine. We do a great buffet menu that will make sure all you guys are happy. We have some great drink packages. And with that, we also have, going in, college basketball is really taking off. We had some big games last week, and people are starting to move into their conference schedule here in the next couple days. So a lot of exciting things. And those Avalanche, representing, they played tonight against the Nashville Predators. They were on a 5-game win streak. They just lost to Dallas. But if you ever want to catch the game, I know there's these weird TV contracts, which I don't like, but we're able to get the games here. So come on down. Support your favorite Denver team, whether it's the Nuggets, Avalanche, or the Broncos. Get down here and just come have some fun. We always throw the best party, and we always have the most fun.
Absolutely, and they have some incredible drink specials as well as food specials this week, as they always do. What you guys are you featuring the whiskey drink again for next month? It's 2 shots of well whiskey, which is a Kentucky Gentleman, for $5. I mean, you can't beat that. There's no place on the in this area where you can get a drink of that high quality for that little money.
Yeah, and if you come in on Sunday, we have this awesome progressive special. So it starts out when you come in the morning. We do bottomless mimosas and $5 Bloody Marys till 2 o'clock. When that ends, we do $7 personal pitchers of domestic beer or $7 of our original flavors, Long Island's in 32 ounces. And then that leads us into the late night. Happy hour all night.
Happy hour all night. You know it. Well, great. Well, next week, again, we want to stress that we'll be here on 10 o'clock on Saturday for championship week, so please tune in. And in the meantime, get off your couches and come on down to Brothers and check us out this afternoon or tomorrow for the pro game. We thank you very much for listening. Seth, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
Let's go, Boomer.
You hear it. Go Cox. All right. Have a great day.